Okay, so if you're watching this video, I can only assume you might be having some trouble understanding the drag and drop functionality in JavaScript. And what better way to learn than with an actual use case? Okay, so I'm going to show you how to drag and drop elements in JavaScript by using this chess game. By the end, you will know how to drag and drop items and understand the mechanics behind it as we learn to take this chess piece and drag it from one place to another. So what are we waiting for? Let's do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new project. I'm just going to create an empty project. Please go ahead and use whatever code editor you wish. I'm just going to choose to call this JS drag and drop interactions with chess. So very specific. This is the directory I'm making in a folder called WebStorm Projects on my computer. So please go ahead and do the same. Just create a directory. You can call it whatever you wish. And in here, we're going to add some files. Now, it's really simple. We're just going to create an index HTML file, making sure to add the HTML extension. Okay, so here's my index HTML file. You will see it comes with some boilerplate code. So if you don't have that, please pause here and make sure yours looks the same. Once you have that, we're going to create another file, this time for our style sheet. So I'm going to create a file called style CSS, just like so, and keep it empty for now. And one more, this is going to be a JavaScript file. So I'm just going to go ahead and call it app.js. Now, once you have these files created, I'm just going to go ahead and work on the HTML file for now. I'm just going to give this a title of something. So maybe let's do drag and drop interactions. So just like that. And we need to link them up. So let's link up the style sheet using the link tag, and we're just going to put styles CSS here, as that is the name of the file and it doesn't live in a directory or anything like that. So we just put the file name as it lives on the same level as the index HTML file. And same for the script file, making sure it's at the bottom, so right at the very bottom between our two body tags. And we're going to use the source attribute for this and put app.js, so once again, just the name of the file. I'm going to tab this out for now so it's a bit more readable. And essentially, in between the two body tags, we're going to put in some elements. Let's just make this a little bit smaller for now. There's not going to be much. We're just going to create a div, tab this out, and give this div the ID of game board, just like so. And then in the game board, we're just going to create a div. This div is going to have two class names, right? So class of square, and also the class name of beige. So make sure there is a space there because it has two class names. And in between these two, well, in fact, maybe let's just have three of these. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to just put this on lines like so. This one's going to be brown. So we've got a beige square, okay, a brown square and a beige square. These all share the class name of square. However, these have the class name of beige and this one is brown. And for now, I'm just going to whack in a child element. Okay, it's going to be an image element, and we're just going to essentially put in an image in here. So I'm going to create a directory. That's right, it's going to hold images, and in images, I'm just going to have a king PNG file. So I'm just going to drag that in like so, okay, and this is essentially what it looks like. There's my king PNG file. It's got a transparent background, and this lives inside the image directory. So I'm going to go into the images directory and get that king PNG file. Great. And that's really it. I'm going to minimize that for now. Of course, we should have some alternative text for the visually impaired. So let's just have king piece, just like so. And also on here, I'm actually going to give this an ID so we can pick it out. I'm going to give it an ID of king. Let's also give it a class name. The class name is going to be chess piece. And I'm also going to add draggable, so the attribute of draggable, so that it is draggable. So if you want to see the full line of code, here it is. That is essentially all the code that I have in my HTML file. Please pause here and make sure yours is the same. Okay, and actually we're just going to have one more. We're going to have a p element with an ID of info, so we can give extra text information to our dragger. So there we go, that is now complete. Okay, so if we open this up now, I'm just going to go ahead and get the path, copy the absolute path, and then in my browser, just paste it in like so. So this is essentially what the file looks like. If we inspect it, you will see it's a div with ID of game board that has 3 divs, and the first div also has a child element of an image element that has the image of the king. Great. So this is looking good. Let's just style this up a little bit more. So I'm going to get rid of the index HTML files. We don't need it anymore. Let's maybe minimize that, and let's work on the style sheet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just grab the whole body, and what I'm going to do is use display flex in order to initialize flexbox. And because we want to center essentially the game board, so the div with the ID of game board, I'm going to use justify content center to center it from left to right. This will not work without that. And I'm also going to use align items center to center it from top to bottom. This again will not work without display flex, and align items won't work actually on this occasion without a height, because the body actually doesn't have a height at the moment. So as a height, I'm just going to save it the height of 100 viewport height. And just because I want the game board and the P element with the ID of info to be stacked on top of each other, I'm also going to give this a direction of column so that they will be on top of each other. Cool. Now I'm also going to grab any element with a class name of square, so dot means class name, and I'm going to give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. Okay, and now if the square, so if the element has the class name of square, but also has the class name, so dot for class name of beige, well, if it's beige, I'm just going to change the background color. So I'm going to give it a background color of RGB. I picked this out earlier, so 227.199. So that is beige, and for brown, I'm just going to change this to brown, and I'm also going to change this RGB value to 965454. So if we look at our board now, this is what it looks like. Okay, but however, we don't want them stacked on top of each other in the game board. I also want them to be from left to right. So I'm going to grab the game board. So let's grab the game board, the element with the ID, so hashes for ID of game board, and I'm going to do display flex. Okay, so now it should look like that. That is looking good. I'm really happy with that. Another thing I'm going to do actually is just grab the P element by its ID, so ID of info, and make the whole element a certain height. I'm going to give a height of 30 pixels, okay, to space it out essentially from the game board. Wonderful. And I think for now this is looking okay. Perhaps we need to also define the chess piece height. So let's grab the items or the image element by its class name of chess piece, so just like that, and I'm also just going to give it the same height and width as I did to the square, so there we go. Okay, that just means that it will constantly be the same size no matter what. Cool. So let's continue. Now let's move on to actually dragging and dropping. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my document, my whole document, using the query selector method for any element with the class name, so dot class name of chess piece. Of course, there is only one, so that is good. We use query selector, not query selector all, right? Because we don't want to pick up more than one piece. And I'm going to save it as the const king. So there we go. We've essentially saved that. I'm just going to console log this out for you so you can see what the king looks like. So if you look in here, refresh and go into the console log, again, the king essentially is the image element that has all these attributes, the ID and the class name assigned to it. So great, we're picking it out. So that is good. Just like I did pick out the king, we're also going to pick out the squares, so squares. However, there is more than one this time, so we're going to use document and a method that comes with document called query selector all. and we're going to look for anything with the class name of square. So there'll be more than one, so I used all. So once again, if I console log this out, console log out squares, and have a look in here and refresh, ta-da, we get a node list of 3 elements. Cool. And you will see they're kind of like in an array, but essentially it's a node list, to be more precise. So cool, we have the div with the class name of square and beige, we have the div with this class name of square and brown, and we have the div with the class name of square and beige. So we've got all 3. Another thing I want to pick out is the info display. So const info display, just like that. We're going to use document again. We're going to use the method of query selector that comes with document, and we're going to look for something with the ID, so hash of info. And amazing, we picked them all out. Now, let's work on the drag and drop events. So the events we're going to listen out for. So we're going to use the add event method that works by attaching it to an element. So we know this is an element, so I can grab that and use add event listener to listen out for an event. Okay, and once that event essentially happens, because we're listening out for it, then we're going to call a function. Okay, so for example, if I listen out for a drag event on the king element, I can call the function of dragging. So let's define that function, right? So here's the function dragging. And I could just do something like super simple. Let's pass through the event. I can console log event target is being dragged. Okay, this is a string. The event essentially is an object of lots and lots of information, and if I go event target, so use dot notation on the object, I can get exactly the target that we are dragging. So for example, once again, so onto the king element, I've added an event listener method. We have to pass through an event which comes from a long list of things. So drag exists on a long list of events that you can pass through into the add event listener, and the function we defined ourselves. Okay, but this needs to be a function, or a callback function to be precise. Okay, so let's try it out. So on the king, if I drag the king, okay, oh, it's saying something e target is being dragged. If I just console log out e, it says object drag event is being dragged. So this is looking good. It's dragging something, right? If I click on something else, nothing will happen because we've only attached that event listener to the king itself. Great. So this is looking good. So we can add the drag event to the king. We can also add another drag event. So let's grab the king, use add event listener to pass the event of drag start. Okay, so once again, drag start exists and exists on a whole long list of events you can listen out for. And now let's write a function. I'm just going to call this drag start. So let's define drag start, right? So function drag start, just like so. And once again, let's just pass through e, and I'm going to do this e, or let's do this time dragging has started on e target. Okay, so this time if I drag it, we get, oh great, dragging has started on, and then we get the object HTML element, and then it's constantly being dragged. You'll see how many times it's refreshing. The drag start essentially triggers once, and then the drag event is continuous. Okay, drag start is once, so at the very beginning, dragging is continuous. Keep that in mind. I'm actually going to save the e target as whatever is being dragged. So let's actually define being dragged here. Let being dragged. Okay, I'm going to leave it as empty for now. And then let's get this, and I'm going to assign e target to it so we know what is currently being dragged. And I'm just going to console log out being dragged instead. So the object being dragged. So now, once again, I mean, it shouldn't change much. There we go. I'm also going to change it here. So instead of E target, I can say being dragged is being dragged. So essentially, we're saving the item being dragged up here. And if I want to, I can even go into that element, because as we know, the king has attributes such as an ID, a class name, and I can even go ID is being dragged. So I can grab its ID, and now king is being dragged, right? Because we got that element's ID. So if you look at it here, here is the element that we are dragging. It's the whole image element, and I've got it, and I use dot notation to get the ID of it. So now it says king is being dragged. We probably need to put a space there. So I can also do it here, being dragged ID. So now it's just more readable for us, right? We have dragging has started on the king, and king is being dragged. Pretty cool. Okay, once again, dragging starts on the king, so that's a drag start event, and dragging is continuous. Cool, so we've covered dragging. I'm just going to get rid of that E for now. I'm actually going to put this above that as that happens first. So this is where we save the E target to being dragged, and that's how we console log it out by its ID here. And then while it's being dragged, well, we've already saved it up here thanks to the drag start. So now we just console log out its ID. What we can do actually is just get the info display as well and use text content equals, and then we can also just put through this text, right? So we can see it in our browser. So maybe let's do that. We can do that, or we can, like, it's up to you. You can put, you are dragging a king. And now that should display it down here as soon as we start dragging. Okay, you are dragging a king. So pretty cool. Maybe actually let's just leave the console log for now, as I think it's useful to see what is going on under the hood. So we've done those two. Those are really the only things that are on the king, all right? So when we pick it up and when we're dragging it, we want to know what we're dragging. Next, we want to know where we drag over, where we drag enter, where we drag leave, where we drop, and where we drag end. So there's a lot of drag events, as I said. These are all basically on your destination, right? So you've got something you're dragging, we've covered that, and next we have a destination for what you're dragging. So on the destination, which is any one of these squares, we're going to have a few things. So here, because there's more than one square, right, we can't just get squares and use add event listener. No, we need to use for each, and for each square, essentially, we need to get the square. So I'm going to go like this, get the square, add event listener, and we're going to, once again, add an event and a callback function. So the events that exist, as we mentioned, are drag over. So we can listen out for when we're dragging over something. So when we're dragging over a square, we can also do drag enter. So when we enter a potential square, we don't drop it in there, we're just entering its vicinity. We also have drag leave. So when we leave its vicinity, we also have drop. So when we drop it into the potential destination, and we of course have drag end. So something that triggers when we end the drag, right? So let's maybe write those functions. I'm going to call this drag over. Let's call this drag enter. Let's do drag leave. Let's do drag drop. And let's do drag end. So just like we did with this, let's do function drag over. So just like that, and I'm going to do console log. You are dragging something, obviously we know it's a king, over, and then let's do E target. And the squares, do they have IDs? Let's have a look. They have class names, so we can just get the class name, right? So just get rid of that E target class list. And let's just comment these out for now so I can show you how drag over works. So now if I drag this over, it says you are dragging something over square brown, right? And if I go here, you are dragging something over square beige, square brown, square beige, and so on. So we get information about the target that we are dragging over. So that's drag over. Let's move on. So now maybe let's do drag enter. So once again, I'm going to save that. Let's copy this function drag enter. You are entering the space of, cool. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to here, you are, if we look in here, you are entering. So as soon as we go into it, it should be like one of the first things that we see. You are entering the space of chess piece, okay? And then you are dragging something over chess piece, right? So entering, you're dragging over the chess piece. So again, if I just do this really quickly, poof. Once again, you're dragging a star on the king, you are dragging a king, you're then entering the space of a chess piece, you're then dragging over the chess piece, you're dragging something over the chess piece, and so on. And it'll obviously keep triggering. So we have a drag over now. Again, this works on whatever you're trying to drag, the destination essentially. And drag leave will be the same, so we can actually just copy this function, drag leave. You are leaving the space of, let's also do drag drop. So function drag drop. You have dropped something into, and then let's do drag end, right? So drag end function drag end. Okay, we've done drag leave, drag over, drag enter, drag drop, drag leave. You are leaving the space of. Okay, so dragging something over, entering the space of something, leaving the space of something, you have dropped something into, and then the drag has ended in, and then wherever we are. So great, I'm going to do this super quickly because you saw how many times it's triggered. Let's go for this. I'm going to go like that. And once again, let's start from the beginning. You're dragging has started on the king. You're dragging a king, so it's telling us we're dragging king. You are entering the space of a chess piece. You're dragging something over the chess piece. Over the chess piece lasts for a long time. You're then leaving the space of the chess piece, right? Because we left it a little bit for a while, it would seem. And then by the end, it essentially goes to, you are leaving the space of the chess piece. The drag has ended in the chess piece. Okay, so a bunch of stuff going on there. So that's pretty cool. So hopefully you can now see all the events. However, we actually want to drop our chess piece in one of these. And in order to do that, we actually do so on the drag drop. So let's go ahead and do that. When we drop it, we actually want to get the E target. So essentially the square we are in. Whichever square that is, it's either a brown square or a beige square. And I'm going to use the method of append to append the item we're being dragged, the item being dragged, so the king. So I'm just going to do that. And that's all I really need to do. However, if you save this now and I go like that, it doesn't happen. Why? Because there are a lot of default actions that we need to prevent. So we need to prevent certain things from happening in order for us to be able to drop this in here. One of them is drag over. So we're going to do E prevent default on drag over. And I actually think that should be fine. So let's try. I'm going to drag it in here and ta-da, we are now moving the chess piece. So this is looking pretty cool, right? Another thing we can do to actually really utilize these other functions, so we're not just console logging out what's going on, we can visually see it, is add a kind of highlight to the square. So back in here, what I'm going to do is add a highlight. So I'm just going to add the class name of highlight, just like so. And then the highlight, essentially, I'm just going to add a background color of 233, 102, 102. And go back here. And on drag enter, I'm going to get the E target, so the square, and add another class list. I'm going to add that class list of highlight. Okay, so that's on drag enter. And then as we drop it, I'm going to get E target and class list remove highlight. Okay, so on drag drop we remove highlight, and actually on drag leave we remove highlight as well. So now you will see how it's kind of highlighting where we were gonna go. Oh, where do we want to go? And it's really obvious to the user that we're planning on entering these squares. However, when we drop it, I also think we should do something. So on the drop, I'm just going to make it have a red border very quickly. So let's go ahead and maybe add the class name of target. Let's give it a border of solid 10 pixels, RGB 1695656, and make it be on the inside. So box sizing, border box. So now on the drag end, what I can do is get the E target class list and add target, so add the class name of target. And after a certain amount of time has passed, I'm going to use set time out and use a callback function. I'm going to get E target and simply just use class list remove the class name of target. Okay. And we're going to just do this after 100 milliseconds. Another thing I am going to do is actually grab the info display text content and just change it to be an empty string. Okay, because we don't want any text anymore. So now, ta-da, see we have text. We are deciding where to drop our piece, and then I drop it in here and it goes red. And ta-da, that's the target. And then the text disappears and the red border disappears as well. So I like this. I think this is pretty cool. I hope you agree, and I hope you've learned a lot about drag events. And yeah, I hope this was useful. So once again, these are the event listeners you should add to the thing you're dragging. These are the event listeners you can have for the destination that you want to essentially drag into. Of course, as there is more than one on this occasion, I've used for each on the node list. You use drag start to essentially save the thing being dragged. You can do lots of cool stuff while you are dragging, such as display text. I've prevented the default action of the drag over. On drag enter, I've added a class list. On drag leave, I've removed that class list. And on drag drop, I've essentially appended that item as a child to that square and removed the highlight class. And on drag end, we've gotten rid of the text, we've added that target, so essentially that red border, and removed it after a certain amount of time as well. So that's really it. I hope you enjoy.